pond, because it possesses a flagellum, or because it has a pellicle. 3. Insects and millipedes have many features in common except the exoskeleton, jointed appendages, compound eyes, and segmented body, which is common to insects and millipede, except one. All these are common to insects and millipede except one, so you pick the odd one out. Then number 4, which of the following pairs are fully adapted to terrestrial life? Which of the following pairs are fully adapted to terrestrial life? Number 1, you have the ferns and algae, ferns and mosses, bryophytes and flowering plants and conifer. Which one is fully adapted to the terrestrial life? That is, the one, which of these pairs is terrestrial in nature? Then number 5, a good example of a diploblastic organism is amoeba, hydra, earthworm, or roundworm. Which one is the answer? Now to the answers of the question. Number 1, the cilia in paramecium is used for what? The answer is B, locomotion. Cilia is the locomotive organ in paramecium. They are the short organs. When you look at the diagram of paramecium, you see it all around the organism. It surrounds it. So it is the one that is used for movements. Then number 2, the answer is A. That is, it has chloroplast. Iglina may be classified as a plant because it has chloroplast. No animal has chloroplast. So that's even a very cheap question for you. You cannot find chloroplast in an animal. You can find a gullet living in pond, possesses a flagellum. Those are animal characteristics of the Iglina. But chloroplast is strictly a characteristic you find in plants. So the reason why you classify Iglina as a plant is because it has chloroplast. Then for question 3, the answer is C, compound eyes. Insects and millipede, all they have in common, they have exoskeleton, they have jointed appendages, they have segmented body. It's only compound eyes. You don't find compound eyes in millipedes. You only find that in the insect. So that is not common to both of them. It's compound eyes is found in insect, but it's not found in millipede. For number 4, which of the following pairs are fully adapted to terrestrial life? It is D, flowering plants and conifers. Fern, algae, they are aquatic. Fern, mosses, aquatic. They are not fully adapted to terrestrial life. But the flowering plants and the conifers, you find them fully adapted to the terrestrial life. Then the last question there, a good example of a diploblastic organism is hydra. Hydra is in 2 layers. I said it has the ectoderm and the endoderm. So hydra is the answer. B, hydra. Cell. We'll be talking about the various things about cell, the history of cell, how cells came into being, then the various characteristics of cell, the components of cell, differences between plant and animal cell. Now, the history of the cell. How did the cell came to be? What happened? How did we come about the word cell? An English biologist, Robert Hooke by name, in 1665 discovered that cells were made. He discovered cell while examining a thin slice of an orb under the optical microscope. In his research work, working with an orb cork, he discovered cell. That was the first person that discovered cell, Robert Hooke. Then also in 1836, a German botanist, Matthias Schleiden, revealed that plants were made up of cells and the product of cell. This man, Matthias Schleiden, was a botanist, that is, a plant scientist. So in his research work, while working with plants, he discovered that plants were made up of cells and the product of cells. That was another discovery about the cell. Also, Theodor Schwann, who lived between 1810 and 1882, he was a German zoologist. He discovered that animals were made up of microscopic units called cells. This man is a zoologist, that is, an animal scientist. He narrowed his research down to studying animals, while the other man Matthias Leddy was studying plants. And you know, in biology we study life, and life is divided into the plant life and the animal life. So you can see botany and zoology under biology. Now, these German zoologists also discovered that animals were made up of microscopic units called cells. So the two of them have now established for us that both plants and animals were made up of cells. Also, Rudolf Virchow in 1856, he was a German pathologist. He stated that cells arise from pre-existing cells by cell division. Pathologists dealing with the diseases of plants and animals, he discovered that there was no new cell, that they come from pre-existing cells. Cells arise from the ones that existed before by cell division. So cell division process goes on producing other cells, and we said reproduction is part of the characteristics of living things. So Rudolf Virchow discovered that cells arise from pre-existing cells by cell division. Now, from the research of various scientists, we came about the cell theory, that is the various postulations of several biologists, their discovery, both the botanists, the zoologists, the biologists, all of them brought their ideas together and their discoveries, and we came about the cell theory. And one, the cell is the unit of structure of all living things. They discovered that plants were made up of cells, animals were made up of cells. So, and living things are majorly classified into two, the plants and the animal. So we conclude that all living things are made up of the structure called cell. Also, cells come from pre-existing cells. That was also said by the researchers, that cells come from pre-existing cells. Also, cell is the basic unit of function in all living organisms. Cell is the basic unit of structure in all living organisms. You find cell in every living organism. For an organism to be called living, it has to have cell. That's the meaning of that statement. The cell is the unit of life. Similar in interpretation, cell is the unit of life. For there to be life, there has to be cell. So that shows how important the cell is and the reason why we are treating this topic. The various forms in which living cells exist. What forms do we have cells? We say all living organisms are made up of cells. So what are the forms in which living cells exist? First, independent organism. Cells exist as independent organism. They exist as colony and also as filament. Also as a part of a multicellular organism. Independent organism. What does it mean? Some cells are free unicellular organisms. That is, they have just a single cell. An example of this, we have the amoeba, the paramecium, plasmodium, euglena. So those are examples of organisms that, the cells of organisms that appear as independent organisms. That is their own form. Then we also have unicellular plants in that category. We have the yeast, we have the chlamydomonas. Those are also examples of independent organisms. And what do these organisms do? They live as a single cell. They have just one cell. Then each of those cells is capable of performing all the functions of living things. That is our Mr. Niger. All the characteristics of living things. Each cell is able to perform those characteristics as reproduction, excretion, nutrition, growth, irritability, and the rest. All the functions of a whole organism, this single cell is able to perform it. Now, another form in which cell exists, we have the colony. Colony are animals organized as association of incompletely separate individuals made up of a colony. They are separate individuals, but they come together in association to form a colony. They are made up of several cells, and each cell is connected by a cytoplasmic thread or strands. So it's a cytoplasmic thread or strand that connects each of the cells. We said there are several cells that come together to form a single being. Then each cell is capable of feeding independently by photosynthesis. So the individual cells come together, joined by cytoplasmic thread, and each cell is able to feed on its own by the process of photosynthesis, and that tells you that they are autotrophic in nature. They are able to manufacture their food. It means they have chloroplast, and in the presence of sunlight, they can manufacture their food by the process of photosynthesis. Each cell divides mitotically into 16 daughter cells. That is, each cell undergoes a mitotic cell division, and at the end of the day, you have a cell producing 16 daughter cells. An example of organisms that exist as a colony include the volvulus, the pandorina, the eudorina, the green algae. All these are examples of organisms that exist as a colony, and you can see from the diagram that's a volvulus. That's a picture of a volvulus, so you can see that. Then we move to the next form. The next form in which an organism, the next form in which a cell exists as a filament. A simple multicellular filament consists of rows of cylindrical cells joined end to end by mucilaginous sheets. Similar to the volvulus, they are multicellular, that is, several cells come together and they are joined by mucilaginous sheets, unlike the cytoplasmic thread that you have in the volvulus. Then all the cells in the filament are identical. They look alike, they are similar. And no specialization of any cell for a particular function. There is no specialization in them. They perform the same function. Not see a particular, that is, there is no division of labor. They all do the same thing. They perform the same function. That's why we say they are identical. Then the cell is self-supporting. The cell is self-supporting. Then the cell that exists as a filament